We're live.
Okay, we're live.
Oh, good morning, everyone. I'm the moderator, but so I guess I will start moderating. This is a debate, 3-on-3, about the type of Elon Musk, the famous, tech business person. We have the two sides of this debate are going to be people who think he's the socionics type ILE, intuitive, logical extrovert, and people who believe he is the socionics type, logical, intuitive extrovert. Presumably there's people out there who think he's other types, but that probably won't be in the scope of this debate. So we have, my name's Andre Cuny. Hello. We have 6 debaters on Team ILE. We have Jack, Peter, and Rita. And on Team LIE, we have Alicia Trey and Damon. So I thought before we start this debate, which is going to be relatively structured, at least compared to typology things you might see on the internet, I wanted to just set the scene a little bit. Who is this guy? What's he known for? What should we know about him? Does anyone know things about Mr. Musk? Nate.
Hopefully, for him to do the debate.
Tell us something, Trey.
Oh, wow, on the spot. All right. Well, Elon Musk is definitely innovative, if anything. He's constantly seeking to make improvements to humankind and the way that we go about doing things. So, I mean, he's done as many things as starting up SpaceX, which is a rocket company, and also Tesla, which is a electric car company. Most of you guys will know of those companies. They're pretty successful, pretty well known. So, yeah, I mean, that's I don't know. I don't want to go too deep into it and start giving my opinion on type in the process, but
oh, sure. What else is so? As you said, Tesla, SpaceX, PayPal, right?
Right.
I think that's the major way of framing it, in my opinion, is that this is a guy who started up many different businesses with a goal which is phrased of trying to save mankind from different disasters. But there's always been this desire to start up these businesses, whether that is, again, PayPal, so an online bank, or it is Tesla, electronic cars, and trying to find a sustainable way of providing transport. Or it's with SpaceX, trying to create the first Mars colony. And also more recently with AI and trying to prevent or at least slow down the development of AI and find neural networks where people's brains can sort of battle against autonomous robots. So I think that's probably the best way of describing him, this creator of different businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So yeah, I think we can proceed to the arguments. We'd agreed for the first few arguments on a time limit of 8 minutes. We'll see if we need it. So it seems like slotted to go first is Peter, representing Team ILE. Are you ready, Peter?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Take it away. I'll start timing from when you start.
Okay, fair enough. Just as introduction, anybody who might be listening, first, obviously, right, LIE and ILE, they are quasi-identical types. So by looking at them as individuals regarding their strengths and what they're good at and their preferences, it may be difficult to differentiate which one from the other, which is precisely why we are having this debate. And actually, let me rephrase it. I don't see that as a debate; it's a discussion, right? Because obviously, nobody can say with certainty the type of anybody. But it is interesting for the argument in itself. I want just to make a general comment. Yes, I notice very often people saying that, Elon Musk is devoted or talks a lot about, or his goal is saving mankind. I don't get the impression. I know that he says that on occasion, that people say that. I don't get this impression from him at all as being his main goal, right? And if I'm not going to claim to be a specialist in him. I know the basic of his life, and actually, as people may notice, I'm in my car. I was driving. I was listening to his 2.5 hours podcast with Joe Rogan. And what I can, the constant trend about him is, first, to say the obvious, he's, regardless of his type, he's obviously an extremely intelligent guy, which is not type related. But he's been all his life, it seems to me, actually stated by the way he himself says it. He's been motivated by developing and thinking of new ideas or new ways of doing things, right? I've read somewhere that when he was a student, I guess either in Canada or in the States, actually that was clear, that he had the idea of making money by hiring out his own flat or his own student flat as a sort of a nightclub, right, for student parties. We do the parties and make money out of it. So he was always, and he looks for ways. Basically, he's more like, okay, this is something I like to do. It's an interesting idea. And he's done that in several fields, in several areas. But of course, he also rather than most people who, if they would go for interesting ideas and they're just for fun and they're not making money out of it, he's also managed to, in all of them, make money out of them. Obviously, there was a bit of luck involved because when he started with his first Zip2 company, that was during the internet boom, and a lot of people managed to, not a lot of people, of course, but a significant number of people managed to do some money out of there. He, of course, was better than most people. But the point I'm making is that he is obviously extremely good in learning something, and then he develops an idea from that. He makes money from that, and then he moves on into doing something else, right? And to me, it shows that he combines, of course, the extroverted intuition and extroverted thinking, or ideas and business logic, depending how you want to call it, which are, of course, the two strongest functions of both ILE and LIE, right? Which is why it's difficult to decide who is who. Then we're going to split between these two types, just looking at the strong functions. I think I have to look at the basic motivation, and also to look at the use of introverted intuition, which is the intuition of time. And what I notice is this, especially talking in the discussion with Joe Rogan, which, of course, having a talk over 2.5 hours, people, of course, which is more or less loose, people tend to be more themselves, I think. What I found interesting is that all the time Rogan was asking about, for many subjects, asking about Musk, what did he think was going to happen in the future, whether it was development of AI or public transportation or about climate change, etc. He was always asking what's going to happen. Is there going to be a catastrophe? Are they going to be slaves to AI, etc.? Always asking about long-term trends. And Musk, he didn't, never, in any of those occasions, he seemed to be either getting the point or interested into having the discussion about, oh, I think this is going to happen in the near future. No, he was always then explaining pretty much what situation is now, right? Yes, he was not diverting into the future. He was diverting slightly sideways, right? Which I see that as he's not really being interesting in longer term trends, despite what he says. Also, something interesting when you're talking about cars and Tesla, he was essentially saying that the reason why he likes Tesla is because it's fun to drive, right? And he likes it's fun to drive, and he loves having it. But he also have a Jaguar, which is a conventional, of course, a conventional gasoline car. And this ex Tesla, he wants to have it, a video game there. He sees essentially it as a big toy. Actually, he has a guy who likes he has ideas, and he has fun with them, and of course he has the best because he's extremely clever. He also makes a lot of money out of them. But his main motivation seems to me he has and also he has ideas and explores them, and then he makes money out of them. Actually, when Joe Rogan asked him, "Are you worried about
you have 1 minute remaining?"
Running out of okay, thank you. He was asking about, do you ever worry about running out of ideas? And Elon Musk said, no, I have 1 million ideas. I never run out of ideas. And finally, about the saving the planet thing of the world, which actually he almost never talks about it. For instance, when he was talking about having revolutionizing public transport with his tunnels idea, etc., he basically said, it's because I live in LA, and in LA the traffic is horrible, so I was thinking about ways of solving that. But the point I'm making is that he's of course he has his ideas are more like, okay, I see this happening around me, this bothers me or bugs me, or I find and I would find interesting to have an idea for that, or get an idea, right? So I don't see him. I can't see him as a sort of a long-term, big visionary. He seems to be a guy with lots of ideas going several directions and explores them, and is very good at making them work, which is why I say I see more extroverted intuition and extroverted thinking, which is ILE, rather than extroverted thinking and introverted intuition would be LIE. Okay, finished.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Great. So that's our opening argument for ILE. So now we are going to switch over to Team LIE. And Alicia, hey, Alicia, has internet is good now? I can't hear you. Sorry, just taking a moment. IT issues. I'm sure we'll be continuing that in a minute.
I'm trouble hearing Alicia.
Can tell she's saying crap.
Yeah, I saw that one also. Do we want to take a minute or two? Do we want to switch the order? Have people sort of prepared certain arguments to go in certain spots, or is it more freeform than that?
It can be freeform.
There was, I think it could be. At the end of the day, it's all needs to be rebutted. There was the idea that we can do strengths first and weaknesses second, but we could switch that around.
Would you be
necessary?
Would you be comfortable taking this turn, Trey? Or let's give Alicia one more chance before we delay it.
Oh man!
Say stuff.
Do you have any other headphones, or maybe even taking out the headphones, just relying on your phone speaker? No.
Were we able to hear her initially when we first signed on?
I heard her say hello. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Strange. Huh. If we need to, I can.
Let's do that. That'll buy us some time.
Hey, Alicia, maybe restart the whole computer rather than just log in and out of the chat. Yeah. That usually helps me.
And it won't bother me if you try saying something while I'm talking to make sure that you've got your audio fixed.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I think we'd all be okay with that. So you're good to go, Trey?
Solid. Awesome.
Okay.
I'm excited.
I'll start the time whenever your argument begins.
Alrighty. So I just want to say before I start this that I do have a lot of this written down. It just helped me structure things a little bit better. So I'm going to try not to sound like I'm reading a paper. Okay. So hopefully it doesn't bother anybody. But so my first points about introverted intuition. Elon Musk is centered around a singular vision. He always has been since he's a child born in South Africa. He's always known that he had a goal of colonizing Mars. That it was something that he wanted to accomplish. He knew since then that he would be moving to the U.S. as this would be the best location to fulfill his vision. He said that the U.S. was a place of opportunity, whereas it wasn't just like a stereotype that people say about the USA, that it's a place for opportunity, but he actually noticed that if he was going to advance that mission, that the USA would be the best place to do it. So that's a major life choice he had decided early on, and then actually ended up fulfilling based off of his original vision. So no matter what you ask Elon, almost every answer he's going to have is going to refer back to one singular point. He's constantly referring to logistics needed to advance and push this vision for mankind. He's constantly assessing the chances of success for a given action and will contemplate the alternatives and measure them based off their risk, along with cost efficiency, etc. It's a great indicator of demonstrative NE and creative NI in service of pragmatism. When asked why colonizing Mars was such a huge pursuit for him, he said, "There must be a reason you get up in the morning and want to live. What inspires you? What do you love about the future? And if the future doesn't include being out among the stars and being a multiplanetary species, I find that quite depressing if that's not the future we're going to have." When pushed further and asked, out of all the issues on the planet, colonizing Mars can be seen as a sort of distraction. You're obviously doing good work in terms of energy sustainability, but why not primarily focus on that over the colonization of Mars? Elon Musk replied saying, "I look at the future as a branching stream of probabilities, and there are actions that we can take that affect those probabilities, or that speed up one thing, or slow down another thing, or introduce something new to the probability stream. Sustainable energy will happen no matter what. It's tautological. If you don't have sustainable energy, you have unsustainable energy. Eventually, you'll run out, and the laws of economics will drive civilization towards sustainable energy inevitably." Not only is this a stellar example of the usage of demonstrative NE and creative NI in pairing, but also displays how measured his actions regarding the future are. He's not simply exploring a multiplicity of projects, but carefully examining which one will have a greater impact in the future. He stresses afterwards, "It's very important to appreciate that colonizing Mars is not inevitable." So as it relates to pragmatism, in everything Elon does, you're going to see a constant sense of improvement. Elon works as an engineer at many of his companies, and it's ungodly how many times he refers to improvement, cost efficiency, etc. He constantly refers to finding the best part for every stage of the process, as well as cutting out unnecessary flack when he's making engineering choices. His acuity in seeing problems as they relate to the lack of efficiency between objects or lack of efficiency in terms of the end goal is the main mode of operating in his approach to every aspect of engineering he's involved in. And as I watched countless videos of him, breaking down how he approached engineering cars and rockets, etc., he always referred back like his main approach in breaking down these projects, as well as electric planes, was always about reducing any inefficiencies and cutting out any things that were unnecessary. So TI in the ignoring slide, and every single rule for every single rule in his company has to do with efficiency. It's a blatant disregard for rules, actually, and there are even rules for communicating as to increase efficiency. In fact, in a company email, Musk had this to say: "Don't follow silly rules. In general, always pick common sense as your guide. If following a company rule is obviously ridiculous in a particular such situation, such that it would make for a great Dilbert cartoon, then the rule should change. Don't let hierarchical structures make things less efficient. Communication should travel via the shortest path necessary to get the job done, not through the chain of command. Any manager who attempts to enforce chain of command communication will soon find themselves working elsewhere," Musk said in his internal letter. Already. So, in regards to emotions for Elon, maintaining emotional equilibrium is not valued for Elon. In an interview with an Air Force lieutenant, he was asked how he runs his companies. Elon refers to issues in department-wide communication causing risks in the inefficiency of product creation. So this is actually pretty funny. He was talking about how if you want to find inefficiencies in the organization, one of the best ways you can do that is examine inefficiencies in the product, because he said that as a result of inefficiencies in the company, you will see that appear in or manifest in the product. So the example he gave was of a battery having a cover. And then also basically the battery department or the battery team made a cover for the battery, and so did the frame team for the frame of the car. And so he said that there were two frames for the battery, and so essentially it was a box inside a box, completely inefficient. And so he basically says to prevent the issues from manifesting, he encourages the team to step on the toes of the other teams. He encourages each team to both offend other people in the company and not get offended themselves. While each team will be in the other's grill, they'll at least ensure these inefficiencies are ironed out. He said this is very important. This is in strong support of TE being valued over FE. The concern for Elon is always efficiency first, even if it means stepping on others' toes or offending other people. He's not promoting a peaceful environment, but instead one of high output and optimum efficiency. So my last point is going to be regarding relations, and it's a pretty short one. It's a lot of quotes, or a few quotes that he's made in regard to relationships. So for Elon, relationships don't come easy, but it's something he values very highly. If I'm not in love, I'm not with a long-term companion, I cannot be happy. I will never be happy without having someone. Going to sleep alone kills me. It's not like this is a separate quote. It's not like I don't know what it feels like being in an empty house.
1 minute for what it's worth.
Perfect. Thank you. Being in an empty house and the footsteps echo through the hallway. No one there and no one on the pillow next to you. Fuck. How do you make yourself happy in a situation like that? Another quote. I'm looking for a long-term relationship, not looking for a one-night stand. I'm looking for a serious companion or soulmate, that kind of thing. Elon's not had a lot of success in his relationships. He's been divorced several times, twice to the same woman. Over years, he's had several relationships that did not end up lasting long. It's clear that the sense of nuance for relations is minimal, as what he's searching for is so black and white. But he has stated the importance of having someone close to him as being very important. So I think that is all I have for my points.
Thank you, Trey.
Cool.
Alicia, how does this sound? I know it's not your turn.
Better.
Oh, we hear you.
Yay!
Great.
Can you hear me? Yay! Good. Okay.
Yeah. So, Rita, you are slotted next, right?
Yep.
Are you ready? I promise I will mute my microphone.
I'm ready. Okay.
Okay. I'll time from whenever you start.
Okay, so actually, Trey your the last part of your argument actually transitions really well into the first part of my argument. We actually have the exact same quotes. So my argument is basically that I think that by trying to type Elon Musk by looking at his strengths, whether extroverted intuition or procedural logic is very difficult, because obviously that's going to be very strong for both types. So I think that the sort of key to understanding his type is really understanding his regard for E versus R. And so, okay, so starting with the same quotes that Trey used, but I'll read them more quickly. So he says, I'm looking for a long-term relationship. I'm not looking for a one-night stand. I'm looking for a serious companion or soulmate. If I'm not in love, if I'm not with a long-term companion, I cannot be happy. Okay, so first of all, I think that that could be regarded as R-seeking, and at first glance, it does appear to be. However, when you probe more deeply, it's pretty clear that what he means by a serious companion or a soulmate is more of an E-based relationship. And actually, there's really no R in it. So for example, when he says that he's looking for a long-term companion, he actually says, if I'm not in love, I cannot be happy. So there's a regard for the state of being in love, the state of happiness. So these are E-based things. He never says in that statement, I'm looking for someone who I respect or who I care for deeply or who understands me like no one else. which would be more of an R seeking type of quote. And then when he elaborates on it, he says, again, as Trey said, going to sleep alone kills me, being in a big empty house, footsteps echoing through the hallway, no one there, no one on the pillow next to you. How do you make yourself happy in a situation like that? Okay, so these are, again, he's focusing on more emotional and comfort, so S-driven needs. So essentially, like, the sort of takeaway from this is that he's not looking for a kind of, unique partner who understands him like no one else. He's looking for like a kind of like almost like a motherly kind of figure. Like almost anyone could sort of fill this role as long as they're providing a certain kind of nurturing atmosphere for him. And he relates this himself to his childhood. He says, when I was a child, there's one thing I would say: I would never want to be alone. Okay, so the primary motive of a relationship for him is not to find a unique person or an individual. It's to not be alone, and it's to experience these happy, pleasant, comforting emotions. When you look at the history of his relationships, you see that he obviously he divorced a few times, which whatever we may or may not be a sign of weak R. But whether it's unvalued is another question. The one thing, though, that does stick out is that he divorced his Tallulah Riley, his wife Tallulah, and then he remarried her like a year or something later. That would be extremely odd for a gamma type, in particular an LIE, because they tend to be very more closed and shut about relationships. Like once you've determined that a person is no good, you do not want them casually in and out of your life. And when he talks about the relationships, he says openly, I just broke up with my girlfriend. I was really in love. It hurt bad. And then he further elaborates, well, she broke up with me more than I broke up with her, I think. Okay, so here we get not just a focus on E without R. So he's focusing on the state of the breakup, how it affected him emotionally. But you also see that he has no qualms about like admitting that he was broken up with rather than breaking up with her, which is perhaps indicative of a person who doesn't value F. Okay. I think that would be very odd for an LIE to admit to that. So there's other indications of his disregard for R in terms of his relationships with other people. So for example, when his parents divorced at an early age, he had to choose which parent to live with. And he said, quote, I felt sorry for my father because my mother had all 3 kids. He seemed very sad and lonely by himself. So I thought, I can be your company. So again, you see this same theme where he thinks all relationships are kind of like they're like a comfort animal sort of thing where like he's not choosing people or he doesn't want people to choose him based on like his particular unique characteristics or character. It's mostly about being present for someone and not letting them be lonely. He openly admits that his father is a terrible person. He says almost every crime you can possibly think of, he has done. Almost every evil thing you could possibly think of, he has done. And while that might seem an indication that he's evaluating his father along our terms, you then later see that he's not, because he, rather than say, okay, my dad's an asshole, I want nothing to do with him, that's clear to me, he attempts to make his father more like amenable to his lifestyle by moving his dad, his father's wife, his children to Malibu, buying them a house, a car, a boat. And then, so he's doing all of these things to make a person who he openly admits is a terrible person, like a good presence in his own life. So these are very sort of like alpha reparations or alpha remediation, like attempts to better a person. With regard to how he, his relationship to the public. So here we have like an opportunity to examine whether he has true e-mobilizing, which would show up in how he talks about the public versus like essentially an e-role. So he says, about people, about like reporters and the news. They're jerks who want us to die. They're constantly trying to make up false rumors and amplify any negative rumors. It's a really big incentive to lie and attack my integrity. It's really awful. Okay, so again, here we see what might seem superficially like our valuing. But then the reporter actually says, oh, when Elon pauses, he said, the reporter gives him a word. He says, it's unethical. And Elon says, no, and shakes his head and says, it's hurtful. So the person is giving him essentially the R evaluation, and he's really forthright rejecting it and refocusing it back on E. Additionally, Elon, in relationship with his children, Elon and his first wife had a child who died very young. And his first wife says that Elon did not want to talk about the child who died. He didn't understand this. He didn't understand why he grieved openly. He regarded it as emotionally manipulative. Okay, so this can kind of go both ways, but I'm going to be a bit controversial here and say that most people would not want to grieve an open child, would not want to openly grieve a deceased child. That is not a specific to any type. However, it seems that Elon has a specific problem with negative emotions.
1 minute.
Which I would see as contrary to gamma and as perhaps specifically indicative of alpha. So yeah, that's the end of my argument. I think that any quote about him or his relationship, when viewed sort of superficially, may point to our valuing and even our seeking. But as you dive deeper, I think it's pretty clear that he's motivated by E-valuing and actually doesn't even consider R.
Thank you. So I guess I'm reading this order. So we're having 2 consecutive turns for Team LIE. Is that correct? Are we, or is that a type?
Yes, I would say.
Should we?
I wonder if I should maybe bring Damon in. Who would like to swap out in favor of Damon?
I can't. I'm sorry.
Anyone who's already. That's okay. Trey, would you be all right swapping out in favor of Damon?
Yeah, I was just about to volunteer.
Okay, fantastic. I shall. Let's see if I can find. Where is it? Ah, there we go. Good.
Yeah. So I guess. I think I'm inclined to keep it to 8 minutes for the rebuttals rather than 5. It seems like it's not that long a time. So yeah. So a second argument now from Alicia. Are you ready, Alicia?
Yeah, you can still hear me?
I can hear you. Great. So
Okay.
It'll be 8 minutes from whenever you start.
Okay, so in a debate with Jack Ma in Shanghai, Elon said, "This is the first time in the 4.5 billion year Earth that it's been possible to extend life beyond Earth. Before this, it was not possible. How long will this window be open? It may be open for a long time. It may be open for a short time. I think it would be wise to assume that it's open for a short time." This sense of urgency and call for action to be taken quickly, I think, is something unique to the F-valuing quadras, in contrast to the more thoughtful, slow and steady wins the race method of the S-valuing quadras, specifically alpha and T's, who would be irritated with the idea of having to act quickly or make a swift decision. This attitude of quick and hasty decision making is seen in his quotes a lot, as well as seen in his actions. In his biography, he was said to have dropped out of Stanford after 2 days in order to pursue an entrepreneurship, and immediately founded a business. Along with that, we'll also see a refusal to quit, to give up. He's been known to work over 100 hours a week, specifically during the recession, in order to keep Tesla and his other companies alive, and frequently refers to the how competitive the car market is, and he's determined to win and to be successful. He's been quoted as saying, "Persistence is important. You should not give up unless you're forced to." These aren't just empty words, but the mantra of his life, basically. He follows through, he pushes himself and his employees towards greatness.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mine's kind of short.
Oh, that's quite all right. Cool. So I guess that Damon, it would be your turn.
I can't hear you.
Damon, you're muted.
What about now? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right,
Yeah.
perfect. So just make sure you guys can hear me well. So first thing is I'm going to rebuttal some of the things that Peter had said.
Okay. You have 8 minutes.
Thank you. So one of the things is that he mentioned that he had never mentioned them saving mankind. That was one specific interview. When you look at the quantity of interviews available, this is always a theme. And it's consistently a theme he's bringing up over and over again. And if you look at how he came from company to company, with the exception of PayPal and the exception of the Boring Company, they're all designed to specifically move in one direction, which is colonizing Mars. He came up with this very early on, and all these other companies are aligning toward that. And he's willing to risk everything to get to that point. Now, Peter had made a point that he said that it seemed that he wanted to make his money and move on to a different thing. And it was something he just likes to do. Well, the reality is he doesn't like to do it. He says it many times that it's hell. It's like chewing glass, staring into the abyss. This is not something he really particularly says he wants to do it for fun, but he doesn't. He does this because he knows that he's worried about the catastrophic consequences of humankind. And he's worried about how things implicate over time. And the reason why he's so focused on present moment things is because he's trying to allude to the fact about how the present moment can shift the course of time. And so his emphasis is always on time. It's never been about fun. And if you ask him, there's not a lot of emphasis on fun, with the exception of the Joe Rogan interview. Everything is about where things are going, the artificial intelligence, how it's impacting it, and how one thing weighs more significantly in time versus another thing. So the idea is that it's his main thing is his fear of being the way he feels about looking toward the future. He's a bit gloomy about it. He doesn't have this more positive outlook. He has more of a gloom and doom. This is what we're going. So this is the thing that we have to present. And he knows that artificial intelligence is going to happen. He's like, there's nothing we can do about that. It is going to be a real danger. And he's very certain. This is not a man who explores his curiosities for the sake of looking at the inner essence of things. This is a man who is very concerned about the future of humankind and is looking at being able to prevent these negative outcomes that concern him. His inability to sleep is a big part of that. The other aspect of it is the fact that he actually does not like how many ideas he has. He sees it as an antithesis versus more of a strength. In fact, he sees it as a distraction. He'd rather focus on these things that are preventing the outcome that he's desiring. And he has said this multiple times, that it's a curse to have so many ideas. It is a curse to keep coming with different ways to doing things because he wants to stick to a particular path. So the one thing I want to say about that is he's very big into forecasting what's possibly happening. Now, again, in the Joe Rogan interview, Peter had said he always moving sideways. And that's because, like I said, he's looking at the implication of how things are acting now and their influence over time. This is not someone who has weak sensing. He's looking at extremely weak sensing. He's looking at actions that are present and seeing how they're affecting time, right? And so he wants to show how the course of events can be altered by certain weight being placed on certain things. Now, the aspect of going to what Rita's arguments are, which is E versus R, I think it's a pretty fatal mistake to try to evaluate motivations with functions that are literally pretty much invisible, right? We're talking about one-dimensional R and one-dimensional S in both types. So one of the things is you're not going to be able to see this very publicly regardless, because it's disregarded or it's just not seen. I think what needs to be identified is his F valuing side, because it's going to appear as a pseudo strength. What you're going to see here is somebody who runs his companies with a iron fist. This is somebody who is very confrontational. And in fact, when he was interviewed in his biography, he was intimidating. And he had mentioned many times like how he will quickly fire somebody. He has no problem doing it. This is not somebody who's worried about having a culture of positivity. This is someone who pushes his workers to the limit, absolute limit. And if they don't perform, he's willing to lay the hammer down. He has been known to be ruthless. He's been called ruthless. He's extremely, extremely confrontational. I think one of the things that we're looking at here is just this, what she presented as a person who's seeking comfort, but that is in no aspect of the most important areas of his life, which are his businesses. That is where he spends most of his time, and none of it is in the sense of comfort. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on the S because it's going to be roughly invisible in both types. But this is a person who believes in conflict. He believes in confrontation. He believes in pushing forward. So one of the things that I think is important is this guy is challenge oriented. He is looking at always pushing the limits, pushing his own physical body to the extreme. He wrestled a 350-pound sumo wrestler just for the sake of it. He wanted to make sure that he could compete and perform. This is somebody who's developed this push over time too. It wasn't a natural. He was a geeky kid who got bullied originally in school, and it crafted over time, and he's seen it as a necessary and valued thing to have in the future, as being very, very conflict oriented and very confrontational. And he is straight to business all the time. This is not somebody who's always looking to have fun. It's just not. If you read his biography, you can see it over and over again. It is stated throughout the entire thing that he is all about pushing his boundaries and the boundaries of his people, maxing them out, running them to the ground if he has to, in order to get this thing done, because he is so scared about this outcome of artificial intelligence and the future. F valuing is all the way visible, and it's something that gets the job done. He believes in pushing himself, despite his own comfort levels, pushing himself to the furthest extreme. And this is a guy who works over 100 hours a week. And he said, if you want to change humankind, you have to put in that kind of hours. You have to, absolutely have to drive that. And so this is not somebody who wants to have someone bring him comfort in life. That is a side thing. And in fact, he's trying to find time to even make time for his family because he's so concerned about the future. And many things he's alluded to, that his family is actually not as important as his fear for the future. This does not mean he's dismissing relations in general. It's just his concern and heavyweight outcome of this is the main thing that I'm concerned about is huge. So I think one of the things is that if we're looking at somebody who does value S, sure, maybe in their own private life, that's something that, sure, I'm not going to go on those quotes because it's hard to read in motivations that things aren't visible. But F, you cannot say that F has not been visible, at least to an extent, bold, being pushed throughout his life as a role function. It is not something he's just putting on temporarily in a short fuse. He does this all the time. He's running his businesses, exhausting himself in and out. This is not somebody who's complacent, somebody who's sitting back and, doing this in short bursts. This is somebody who's running on gas and has no idea when to stop. They're running out, going. And he even said vacations will.
1 minute.
Thank you. He even said one time when his ex had forced him to go on a vacation, and he specifically said vacations will kill you, because he almost died of a fatal disease, right? And he got caught, or rather a virus. He got caught with a virus, and he was making a joke about how vacations are bad for you. This is not somebody who is seeking and suggestive of someone who is trying to give him a more relaxed lifestyle, like you would see in someone who is SI suggestive. This is somebody who does not believe in sensing and does not believe in S at all. This is somebody who is totally rejecting of that aspect. And when it was provided to him, he resisted firmly that vacations will kill you. I'm finished.
Thank you. So I guess the last speaker in our structured 8-minute segments time will be Jack. I guess I just want to talk a bit what will happen after that. I just think, people may have come up with things that occurred to them. So I think after that's done, people can take turns, say some things, probably no more than like 2-3 minutes for those, though a few seconds is also fine. And we can see where that goes from there. So Jack, your turn.
Okay. So I think that the reason why I wanted to have this debate in the first place is because I thought that Elon Musk was an especially interesting character to look at. And I certainly typed him as LIE to begin with. And I thought that was seemed to be very clear from looking at the available evidence. It was only after speaking to Rita, Peter, and looking at things which seem to be going on under the hood, under the more apparent data, that things didn't seem to make sense for the LIE. Now, I'm going to be covering a lot of points which people have made here about, for instance, this outward projection, at least, of a very efficiency-focused, very restless, almost combative individual who is driven by seeing long-term outcomes and wants to produce most efficient ways of getting around them as possible so that doom is averted. But then when we take this facade, as it were, of an LIE, what doesn't seem to make sense, at least from a strengths point of view, is when we think of gammas in general and gamma values, there's this focus at the end of the day on the individual. What can I do? How can I be independent of other people's pressures? How can I carve out my own particular achievements and no one can take that away from me? Instead, what we find with Elon Musk is almost the opposite. He loses himself in the needs of a cosmos, and he wants to bring about the best outcomes for the future of mankind. It sounds like an LIE, but it doesn't seem to be coming from the same place. And we see at each point, he goes towards the most farthest off reaching possibilities which he wants to realize. The resplendent idea of actually landing on Mars, seeing the progression of mankind. And yes, people will say, as Damon has, and as Trey has, and Alicia has, that he's couching it in words of doom. But we must think of someone in a social environment. What happens when you have interesting ideas you want to see realized? How do you get people to be motivated across this? And if we take the idea of he's some sort of extroverted ethics type, rather than an extroverted logic type in his values, that he will be really thinking about what actually motivates people and gets people on board. So if you couch it in terms of doom, this is a terrible thing that's going to happen. We've got to do all these things and make these new possibilities occur. That is far more effective than simply entertaining whimsy, or at least being appearing to entertain whimsy. I've seen it certainly myself with my getting involved in politics. I started talking about the future is going to be socialist, and I used to talk about this quite a lot, and talk about the doom and the worry I have in this very similar way as he talks about artificial intelligence. We also can talk about that sort of need to wrestle 360-pound sumo wrestlers, to actually engage in these sort of braggadocious exploits of strength. I used to get into wrestling matches in public all the time, quite physical, because I thought that was quite fun. I liked to show off strength, but it wasn't something which I actually took seriously when I say took hits in the same way which Elon Musk, and Elon Musk does not seem to be taking hits in this area either. I would like to take a chance to sort of look under this hood as well. And first of all, with some of his relationships with people at the business, not what he's telling people proactively about efficiency. When talking to Jim Cantrell, who used to work very closely with him, he says this: Elon really doesn't care about the money. He wants to go to Mars. It was always focused on Mars. None of this was focused on the market. I was the guy who had the market focus, and I was like, hey, look, Elon, we got to have a return on investment. His response to me was, I don't really give a damn about return on investment. And when you think of an LIE, they tend to be far more conservatively minded. Failure is very likely to happen unless you're very careful at seeing how it's like to turn out, to take in the facts and research in this way. Elon Musk runs at the possibilities and thinks that as long as he puts this all into it, he can get through on the other side. So, and also I'm interested to talk about his sense of learning. He doesn't learn by absorbing lots and lots of facts. He has a methodology of going about getting to the very basic principles, breaking it down to the most abstract rules and building out from there to understand how these different systems works, which allows him to dive into many different areas without that need to have a truly thorough expertise, which only acquired through many years of experience. I'll talk about another thing which is reported about him, about how he is when he's not necessarily at work. Musk is in a different mood than he was at SpaceX, and that's something that those who've come to know Musk observe. One moment he may be reciting favorite lines from an animated TV show he just saw. The next he may be curtly giving detailed instructions. The next he may be ignoring you while lost in a thought. The next he may be asking for your advice on the problem. The next he may be breathless with laughter while riffing on a humorous tangent for 5 minutes. The next he may be acting as if you've both never met, and through it all you learn not to take it personally, because chances are that it has nothing to do with you. And I think this is the Musk, underneath the Musk we've come to know, underneath the Musk which reporters like to talk about, this prospector of doom, this caricature of an LIE who is somehow far more exciting than any other LIE you may encounter, who's focused on far more and fantastical, and has worked to make the fantastical look like real practical problems we need to work on, and get people willing to give money, even government grants, to actually support his companies. So this is the complexity of this character, and why I find him so fascinating. A character who I have thought from the outside seemed to look very much like some sort of very dynamic LIE. But it seems to be that once you get past this facade, you find a set of seemingly very driven NILE who has completely dedicated himself towards the ideas which grab his attention, but has this far more silly side, has this far more positive, almost childish humor which comes out. And this is the little complexity which I just wanted to explore in this debate. I think that's all I have to say at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's our 6 debaters giving their pitches. At this point, I wanted to give the first 4 debaters, if they had something on their mind, to say something again. I'd cap it at like 3 minutes if it does get that long. Does anybody want to? I know Trey did.
I'll watch private chat just in case Trey wants to pop in.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I can say something briefly.
Rita first, then Peter.
I can take myself.
Okay, yeah, I'll just sorry, can I go first? I'll just say, because Damon made a point about Damon sort of counter-argued our devaluing argument by saying that it's not sort of a good strategy to look at these like R and S functions because they're weak, and so it's just like it's not going to be indicative of whether he's LIE or ILE. Well, I think that that's kind of a strange broad brush statement to make, because after all, we know that even the weak functions do play a role in Model A, and so it's sort of akin to saying, well, then you'd expect weak elements to have no influence on a person's socionics type. Moreover, if you like further this statement, you would, like Damon made an argument based on F mobilizing, which is still a weak function. And so I would say that if he takes this own approach, that it would sort of annihilate his own argument. So then we should just be having a debate on P and extroverted intuition and practical logic and which sort of function it fits into. So I don't think that's a very good strategy. I think that I think that often weak functions can play a really pivotal role in determining a person's socionics type.
Well, I'd like to interject real quick, if that's all right.
I would prefer if we went in order. Peter, did you want to speak before, or did I hear you correctly?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Because I have a problem hearing you guys, to be honest. Okay, no, briefly, as a general comment. Yeah, I mean, the problem is that what we've been discussing shows a bit a problem of typing a public figure like Elon Musk, because, for instance, okay, as I said, when I looked at an interview with him directly, I was looking at let's say the raw, the actual his immediate reactions, and then, for instance, when he was asked what keeps you awake at night, he didn't say, the future of mankind, or it is because of and very spontaneously cars, because keeping a car company working is very difficult. It keeps me awake because it's so hard, etc. And of course that contradicts what these other facades. So the point I'm making is that, as a general comment, I suggest it's better to as much as possible to get the raw vision, the raw input, because obviously there is the public image, the facade, and there is how he actually is reacting when confronted with information at the moment. But at the end of the day, so the information will be, if anything, he is one person in a certain environment, which is when having a sort of conversation in a studio over 2.5 hours, and he's another person when he's propping up his public image, which I suggest is already another indication. The points that Rita made generally regarding the art stuff, yeah, of course, we cannot know what is going on between of any two individuals without being there. I mean, even the individuals themselves, they often don't know, right? So I just want to say that in the case of Musk, it is certainly would be very unusual for LA in particular to go to divorce and marry the same person, because as Rita said, the R5 is based on a suspicion, or basically saying a question of trust, and the point is, okay, if that person, if that didn't work out, that person once, this person left, so why should I expose myself to this again? That's a general comment, of course. I'm saying it'd be unusual for LAs to do this. I'm not saying, of course, it's impossible. Nothing is impossible, but certainly, I would say that for gammas generally, right, a relationship is more with an individual, is more, let's say, it's more about an individual as a person, right? So I would say the following.
Try to wrap up soon if you can.
Sorry?
Try to wrap up soon if you can.
Yeah, sure. I'm also about. The point is that, as Rita said, mentioned, for it's also unusual. It's not for an LAE to say, "Oh, I feel I have problems sleeping alone at night or in a bad night," because essentially it means, okay, I'm missing the physical presence of a somebody with me. While for a gamma, it would be more, oh, I'm missing the fact that individual X is not anymore with me, or is not connected to me anymore, even if this person is on the other side of the planet, right? So these are the difference between having R together with T, with intuition, with S, right? But that's just a general comment, so that's it.
Okay, Damon, then Trey, and I'd say maybe let's do a system where if you want to speak, put in the chat that you want to turn, and I'll sort of go in order of when people request that, so we don't have to talk over each other. Damon?
Okay, so a couple things. I'll go off of what Jack said first. Jack did say that he is more focused on the culture of humankind, right? Like, he's not focused on individualism. One thing that I found interesting, though, is I think this boils down to the individual of humanity and keeping humanity's individualism. I believe this is far extending just oneself, but the collective identity of humanity as an individual. Now, this is hard to conceptualize, but this is something that I think is what makes Elon a very interesting person, because he is talking about not like the idea or possibility of blending with AI, but specifically preserving humanity. And that can be seen as an individual concept, not necessarily a person. But pivoting on what Rita's counterpoint was, I did not say that we should not look at weak functions. I do believe they play a role in Model A. I think the problem is confirmation bias. You and I can look at the same weak functions and identify that we say this means that, and there's not enough substantial evidence to actually validate that. So it's just too invisible to really form a very strong conclusion to say that that's what that means, because it's just not enough. There's not enough substantial evidence to do that. So when I mentioned F valuing, right, someone says bold, and it's because that it's actually a pseudo strength. It's not actually strong, but it does not manifest necessarily as a weakness either, because it's kind of slow and steady wins the race. This is according to the theory of triads, right? What we're looking at is something that does not manifest as a weakness. So if you're looking at the 4 weak functions or the 4 weak information elements, one of them will not manifest as an apparent weakness, and that's generally the mobilizing function. So that's why I hit on that, not because I don't believe that we should look at weak functions or they don't play a role. So my argument doesn't actually collapse on itself if you look at the theory of triads. So one of the things is, I'll bounce back to, I don't think Elon is focused, and Jack said, he's trying to get people on board. I don't think this is his motivation at all. He is really interested in accomplishing this goal, and if people are on board, great. If not, get the hell off the ship. It's not like I need to sell everybody on this. It's not a stage performance for him. He's not putting on a performance to get people to join in and create inspiration. He is trying to prevent something. And in his interview, specifically in his biography, it has stated this multiple times. This is not a media reporting or a portrayal of this. And it specifically, Elon said, and the interviewer said, that Elon cannot stand, it is cringeworthy for him to see anything factually inaccurate. In fact, Jack was completely incorrect when he said that Elon does not take in a number of facts. Elon, through the majority and the half of his life, focused on reading information and excessively running through encyclopedias, collecting an absorbent amount of facts. It wasn't.
Try to wrap up soon.
Okay. And it was an absorbent amount of facts. He is known to consistently read encyclopedias and data and bring it in to evaluate. There is no series of consolidating it into a series of principles. So this is just the theme that he has always been, is collecting facts. It's all throughout time. It's not necessarily about money either. Again, on a bigger scale, when you're looking at this person is looking at getting return on investment. But to say that all LIEs are interested in profit in a business, I think is minimizing the idea of what pragmatism actually is. It depends on one's goals. You can have an LIE doing art to art, and are they really caring about an ROI on that? No, maybe they're looking at their time put in and the output that's created from that in a different way. I think that by conceptualizing this and putting this to a less flexible, this is the stringent way of how we identify personalities, not all LIEs are going to appear the same, and they're not all going to be in business. I think this is a very general idea, and I think it's very limiting on seeing the flexibility of personality and being able to adapt differences. And I know somebody else needs to go, so I'm wrapping it up.
So it'd be Trey, then Jack. And again, if you want to get in, put it in the private chat.
Solid. So I do have a few things to comment on, one of which was when Jack pointed out the projections of the future that Elon had put forward as being for dramatic effect or to stir the crowd, to get people motivated to a cause. I don't see this. The thing is, like I pointed out earlier, he's constantly dismissing any kind of emotional field for pragmatism. I mean, in his company, the way that he organized things, he made it very, very clear that stomping around on other people and in other departments, getting up in people's grills, making sure that you're rude, he literally said that you will offend people if you're doing this right. He said he wants there to be clear communication between departments to optimize efficiency. That's a clear indication of someone valuing efficiency over, any kind of emotional equilibrium. But then I think that there's a lot of attention being put on relations and emotions, a little bit strange attention. I feel like there's been a lot of indicators of relations, and then it keeps being referred to, oh, well, he wants the physical contact or the presence of a body. And I don't really think he said any of that. I think that he just pointed out that he wanted someone in his life. He didn't really actually give a lot of information, which probably would have been helpful to understand a little bit deeper. But I think there were a lot of situations where there was a clear indicator of our valuing, and then a lot of sort of excusal, I guess, for why it might not actually be a clear indicator. Then the last thing I want to point out is in regards to his lack of stability in his life. In his companies, I think you mentioned this. I don't remember what point you were driving at, but I think you mentioned how his companies aren't exactly turning a profit. He doesn't seek comfort in any aspect of his life whatsoever. When seeking to find a CEO to take over Tesla, he said it was really easy to find someone who could keep the company stable, but extremely difficult and rare to find someone who could grow the company and expand it. This is also evident in Tesla's constant history of teetering on the edge of financial death.
Try to wrap up soon.
Okay. He spent countless nights in the Tesla factory, spending New Year's helping Tesla to achieve its production goals. He stressed numerous times that they're trying to change the world at both SpaceX and Tesla, and having time off and not dedicating yourself fully is not for people who want to change the world. It's a clear dismissal of comfort over enforcing change, both personally and in business. And I think that that's something that's pretty evident. I think that I don't know how it can be stressed enough that he's constantly pushing away comfort. In fact, one thing that I noticed Damon didn't mention earlier when he was covering SI was that when he talked about vacations being the death of him, his girlfriend at the time actually had to push him for a very, very long time to take a goddamn vacation. And he wouldn't do it. And he told her he wouldn't do it. And then finally, after being pushed and pushed and pushed by her, he went on a vacation and then came back and made the joke that vacations will kill you. So I think that if someone were suggestive SI, they might take the vacation. And then also earlier, I think this will be my last point. I think Peter referred to an LIE being a little bit maybe saying that an LIE letting someone back in their life like that might be a little strange. But if it's a suggestive function, then I would expect that an LIE wouldn't really know whether or not it would be a good idea to let that person back in on their life. I think it'd be pretty one-dimensional for them. And I think that someone telling them that it would be a good idea might actually be enough to sway them. So,
thank you, Jack. Then Rita.
Okay, so about the learning point. I've got the source here on how Elon Musk learns. And yes, it may look like he's taking in lots of factual information, but the way he approaches it is this. He follows the 5-hour rule and put at least 5 hours per week into learning. Fair enough. He studies widely in many different fields. He understands deeper principles and mental models that connect these fields. He applies those mental models to their core speciality. So what we see here is getting down to the basic underlying principles for understanding, using introverted logic to connect together the ideas in his head, rather than piecemeal collecting factual data. And I want to take Damon up on the point about this focus on factual accuracy. Now, we all know I'm quite a debater. If someone says something in public which I don't agree with, I will challenge them on it. I can barely restrain myself. But what I don't think I have is the same painstaking factual accuracy, which we can see in many extroverted logic leading types. And this is a sort of painstaking nature where when, say, an LIE or an LSE tries to explain something, and you then rephrase it back to them in your own words, they will then say, no, that's not what I mean. And then they'll repeat exactly what they've said in the formulation put together, which they think perfectly accurately represents the facts of the case. That is what I call the painstaking nature of extroverted logic. Not that I have these opinions, you're saying something different to me, so I'm going to correct it, and I'm going to call it factual accuracy. So this is, again, an example where he's couching things in terms of what we tend to be more likely to accept. We live in a culture where we accept factual accuracy, things being called factually accurate. It's the scientism of our age. We live in an environment where we accept preventing doomsday scenarios. We're very much of that sort of consciousness in modern day. But when we actually see in terms of behavior, when he acts out, there seems to be something quite different. Now, go back to the not caring what others think. In terms of how he presents himself, you have to care what others think because he needs to get government money and government approval to build his rockets and all the rest. So I would say he's just acting in terms of his own individual volition. There is also that desire to appeal to people and present himself in a certain way. But in terms of this rudeness, which he encourages in his company, I mean, are you suggesting that an LIE actually wants to create environments of rudeness? Or is it more the case with Gamma that they'll say what they think and they're not going to be encumbered by what other people saying that's politically correct or that's right or wrong? I've never really known a Gamma to go out of their way to be rude unless it's a particular individual they dislike and they want to have some sort of vengeance against them. Instead, what this seems to me is more of a, oh, this is a culture which I think is going to really shake things up. So I want to motivate this sort of culture. At the same time, fair enough, not paying nearly as much attention to introverted sensation as is actually required. But I think that's something which is completely consistent with an Lee who really hasn't developed this area, who's really been focusing on pursuing of his idea. Back to vacation, who needs to be pushed to drop what my mind is fixated on to go on a vacation. I see that as I don't want to do this. Okay, I want to focus on what I'm interested in, which I think is really, really important now for me, and sort of pushing my mind out of that focus. I find is a very painful thing to do. So there's more and more stuff here which I actually find myself relating to with Elon Musk, and which I think, yes, it's weak introvert sensation, certainly. It's also weak introverted ethics, but I have not seen him necessarily violate the very terms of introverted sensation as I have seen with his behaviors with his relationships. That's what I'll say.
Cool. Rita is the only person in the line right now. If people have more points, feel free to add yourself to the queue.
Yeah, so I'll just say, like, because in closing for myself, obviously Elon Musk is a pretty unique person. That's what makes this debate so interesting and so fun. If he were a very obvious type, it would be a very dumb debate. I think that if I were to summarize the arguments made from both sides for the people watching, well, one, whichever side you disagree with, whichever side you end up agreeing with will probably be a function of both your own preconceived notion of Elon Musk and of his type and of socionics, but also of possibly, hopefully, some of the arguments that one side or the other has presented. Which is the point of a debate, to actually reconsider things. Okay, but yeah, if I were to like very broadly summarize what I see as the key arguments made by each side, I would say that because Elon Musk is such a weird and unique individual, it kind of has forced each side to take a unique approach in summarizing his type. So to me, the LIE argument seems to hinge on essentially conceptualizing information elements in a way that is not the prototypical scenario or use case. That's my take on the argument put forth for LIE. The argument put forth for ILE, in contrast, keeps the information element prototypical use case intact. However, it hinges on not taking sort of pithy quotes and particular word choices at face value, but instead in examining further the context in order to understand the primary driver to these kinds of statements and choices. So I think whichever argument you tend to favor will be a function of whether you sort of want to take a more broad interpretation of the information elements, or whether you would like to sort of look further into the context of the quotes and the word choices that were made.
Thank you. Trey, you wanted to say something? Trey, you are muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I've got two things I want to say in response to Jack's argument. I was looking for the quote. I couldn't find it, so I'm sorry. But there was a point where Elon Musk someone asked him to define some characteristics of himself. And one of the first things he did was say that he places high value on the truth, because without knowing and understanding the truth, you can't actually do anything with it. You can't actually solve a problem. That, I think, is a clear indication of TI and support, maybe, of pragmatism versus pursuit of truth in and of itself. But there was also, what was the other point you made? Oh yeah, back to the FE, back to emotions. So I didn't necessarily mean to imply that he is going out of his way to be rude to people. In fact, the conversation that he had was with a lieutenant in the military, in the Air Force, I believe. And they were talking about his managerial style. He was asking him, how is it that you run your company? How do you go about managing your company? Because he wanted to understand, how to set up an environment where people can succeed. And the thing that he kept stressing was that if these people didn't communicate in the way that he said, it would end up causing inefficiencies on an individual level. And what would end up happening is that, from department to department, they would plan to make things happen a certain way, and then the product would suffer as a consequence of both departments overlapping each other, both departments tackling the same issue. And so the whole reasoning that he had behind ensuring that one group, that one person was blunt and possibly even offending others, was because he wanted to ensure that there was an increase in efficiency in information exchange, and ensuring that those inefficiencies of the product design didn't happen. And even in his tackling that issue, the whole reason that it even came up in the first place was due to him seeing a problem in the product and wondering, how did that get there? What were the series of events that caused this to manifest? And he said that the product would be a good reflection of inefficiencies within the company and how they had been going about tackling issues. So that's just a point I wanted to make. It wasn't necessarily that he was tackling or hoping to come across as rude or propagating rudeness, but I think that the whole reason that he employed that rule was so that people would have more efficient communication and more efficient have a more organized end product.
Cool. I guess we're at the end of the queue for right now. Maybe we seem to have.
I got one last one.
Sure.
All right. So one of the things I want to clear up is that Jack said this painstaking, thing about facts, right? And it was specifically stated that it is very cringeworthy to him. Not that he just challenges it, but it actually deeply bothers him when something is factually inaccurate. And every time you can see this in interviews quite consistently is when someone asks him a question that they just clarified, he always re-clarifies. He always goes, no, that's not what I meant. And then he explains. This is a very consistent theme that you will see in his interviews. And one of the things is that, of course, everybody's going to want government funding, Jack. That's how you get a business going, right? It doesn't matter. They're not going to, an LIE isn't going to go, well, I don't want government funding. They're going to do what it takes to get there. And maybe that's putting on a face, right? That's what role E is. It's putting on a face to get what they need. But on the other hand, one of the things that Rita said is that we're cherry picking essentially quotes and not looking in motivations. This is actually inaccurate. And she's also saying that we're expanding the bounds of what stays within consistent Model A. But that's also being done on the opposing side, because how do you explain someone who spends 95% of their time in the mode of F? And you call that a weak function, and yet they're doing that all the time. They are pushing themselves and others to the limit. So this is not a role function is quickly fizzled out. It is not something that can be sustained for long periods of time. And that is one thing that does not hold its position with Model A, with what the argument that you guys are presenting, is that if this person is consistently competing and consistently pushing, not for the sake of fun, but to change the future of humankind, which is what his motivation is. So to correct Rita, our argument is not that it's some kind of weird abstraction of Model A, but in fact, the central argument is this person's primary driver is not the sake of relations or comfort. It is somebody who is concerned about the future of humankind and doing what they can to find the most efficient route to colonize Mars, not to pursue their careless curiosities and just explore. This person is not necessarily interested in just exploring. Their goal in life from when they were very young, right? Elon's goal was when he was very young was, I want to colonize Mars. this is what I think is necessary for humankind, even before AI was really introduced. And so this is very much of a misconception on the position that we're presenting, is that we're arguing about some cherry picking arguments and analyzing quotes. I read his biography twice before I went into this interview. So it's not that I'm just like looking at quotes and cherry picking. I'm actually dissecting what one's motivations are to doing what they're doing. And it indicated that this person is very driven about changing the future. And sure, they're reckless. You're going to see the lack of S in both types. They're quasi-identicals. But the way that Ibrahim had showed me was the way to determine the difference in quasi-identicals that's most consistent is going to be looking at the theory of triads. Now, you make a strong point, Jack, in the fact that, with gamma quadra values, I think that was very fair. I think that was a pretty strong point. I think the differentiation here is that you're not going to see it.
Wrap up soon.
Okay, you're not going to see a lot of R. Again, going back to the theory of triads, you're not going to see a lot of R in the LIE as you are in the other three types. That's the one that's missing. So when you talk about these harsh judgments, this is somebody who, like Trey said, is black and white. You're not going to see a lot of that in the personality, but if you look under the hood, it might be there, but it's not going to be as apparent. And so I think that it's like we can argue R all day, but really subject to confirmation bias because we're two sides of the fence. That being said, Andre, I'm closing. This is a very hard person to type. And I think that as a result of this, I think neither side has been effectively swayed, but I think it opens up a lot of subsequent discussions on this particular personality. And I think that with more due diligence, we can actually reach a conclusion and actually successfully benchmark the type. But at this point, I think that we have not presented enough for the benchmark to be changed, but we will. And I think that with further due diligence, I think that that's what would be the next step. But at this point, I don't think we've presented enough to possibly change the benchmark. I will position it like that, and that's how I will close.
At this point, it seems like we have a nice, reasonably active audience here. Thank you, audience, for taking the time on a Saturday morning to watch this. Do you have any questions, either for the entire panel or for specific people on the panel? It can be on points they made. It can also be, thoughts that you were thinking or questions about the guy or about notation. Anything you'd like. I'll give you a minute or two.
As far as questions?
Yeah, from the larger audience.
Yeah.
If anyone has things they wanted to know, wanted to see addressed.
On the record, this was really fun. It was interesting to hear all these different viewpoints. So
I enjoyed it too. I enjoyed preparing for it as well.
Me too. I've always been sort of teetering on the edge between these two types in my head. So I just thought it would be good just to discuss it out. And I think that's been a success.
Right.
Before I actually solidified down on this type, my original suspicion was actually ILI. Can't really justify the amount of work he does, though, with one-dimensional SE.
So we have one question. Why wasn't function charges used as a factor to help aid your typing? Negative NI. It was pretty obvious for me.
Jack, you want to go that one, or you want me to do that? Or you're on mute,
Well,
Jack.
I would say that when it comes to charges, it depends what sort of charge you're talking about. Are you talking about Galenko's charges or Bukalov's charges? My opinion in general on charges is that they are mostly superfluous and largely can be put together just by blocking different elements together. And yes, I mean, if you frame introvert intuition in a negative way, it doesn't mean that each type consistently frames introvert intuition in a negative way. I wouldn't say that's necessarily something you can point out and pick out as something which is consistent. I think instead we should focus on the information elements and how they're blocked together, and how we should put together our arguments.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that more bluntly because function charges suck. So sorry, I'm not going to use that.
Agreed. I think blocking covers all you need to know. I think that, there's just, it's kind of an unnecessary, arbitrary add-on. So I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, it doesn't add really any of all explanatory value, and it's confusing.
Okay, we have a comment about triads. Hasn't caught on in the broader socionics community. I think that idea is like something like what, a month old, so that makes sense. But it's interesting to think about. Jack, have you found a quote? Seems like you are participating with your alter ego.
It looks like he's. Oh, there you go.
Which one? Which one, Carla?
I'll let that resolve itself and move. Is there a chance of debating Richard Feynman?
Any better? Can people see me?
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you and see you.
Well, I'll just let the quote conversation play itself out for a minute. But
interesting point. I just saw a question here about who wrote Musk's biography himself. From what Damon was telling me, actually, when he was prospecting who was going to write his biography, I think he sat down with the lady who ended up doing it, and he looked deeply into her eyes and asked her, or told her, "I'm evaluating whether or not I can trust you." And then afterwards decided that she'd be the one to write the biography.
Now, that being said, though, he actually did not want a biography. She had pestered him over and over and over again to actually do it. He didn't want a biography at all.
Debating Richard Feynman. Anyone want to debate Richard Feynman? Probably not now, but does that
let's start again. Let's start again. I have no idea who he is. Let's wing it.
He's a physicist known for his like witty quotes and stuff.
Okay. Let's wing it. I'll put up an argument.
How about we trade places and we'll argue ILE and you guys argue LIE?
Oh, that's fun. I could probably argue both. To be perfectly honest, I could probably more easily argue LIE than ILE.
Didn't you think he was IEE, or is that outdated?
Oh, sorry. That's for Musk. Sorry, for Richard Feynman. Feynman, it's more IEE versus LIE. I think that's more the controversy. I just wanted to know from Carla what quote. Oh, hang on. So one way his friend said he's not interested in money. Okay. Let me link that. Hang on.
It actually is a quote he did say. Yeah, he did say that.
Yeah, he did say that. But I don't know. He also referred to the. Like, I think there was a question about like why Tesla didn't patent their technology, and one of the reasons that he had said that Tesla didn't patent their battery technology was because he actually wanted to increase competition. He didn't want to inhibit competitors because he wanted to see the electric car industry succeed. So see that how you will, but.
Excuse me. I find this a very strange argument because you can patent the technology. By the way, I say that as somebody who has patents, and you can patent technology and just say, okay, everybody can use it. I'm not going to charge you royalties for that, right? So I found that a very strange argument.
Yeah, I don't. I could be using the wrong terminology. It's something that I read it a little while ago. I don't know if it was a patent. I don't really know what the specifics were. I just know that they had the option to limit use, and they didn't. They made their designs public. They wanted other competitors to have access to that information so that they could better build electric cars, because Elon Musk's interest is not in advancing his company, but his interest is in advancing the electric car market altogether.
Oh, no, but I want to ask this because this goes beyond type. This is very strange because he doesn't himself, right? He's just one of the major shareholders, right? He still needs to have investment. And if you have a company based on technology, and if you the most valuable asset to your company is the intellectual property, if you then say to your investors, "Oh, I don't want our technology to be unique. I want everybody to copy it." Then people, you see what I'm getting at, right? I'm just
I can see
argument.
Right. No. I'm very well aware that it can be taken both ways. It sounds like free information exchange. At the same time, you could also say that he's not really interested in just the succeeding of his own company, but of the car market in general, which was
I'm not making arguments.
reason-
I just had a
Oh.
thought about that, and I just found it odd. So.
All right. Kat asks if we reached a conclusion. I guess we sort of didn't, in the sense of like the teams are still on their native side
Still
that
at
they
odds
started
with each
from.
other.
But it was a good discussion. You should watch it.
This is like a political debate. No team throws up their hands and goes, "You know what? You're right. I concede."
Yeah, Joe Biden does respect
No
time
longer
limits, though.
Republican.
Yeah,
You've
no longer
convinced me.
Oh, you're
Wait,
not
I'm
gonna,
actually kind of curious.
It's not going to be something where
Rita, then Jack.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
no, that sort of stuff just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I'm actually no. If I change my mind, I would say it. I don't. I can change my mind during a debate. So I'm actually kind of curious though for the people like tuning in, whether like people can comment if they've changed their mind as a result of the debate. I'm just curious, like.
Good idea.
You don't have to say like what you changed to and from. It's not about like point scoring. It's just I'm curious if there's any impact of these debates at all.
I'm sure there is.
Jack, what do you want to say?
I say, look, it's very unlikely that people debating are going to change their minds during a debate. Some can, but I find that it's far more likely you're going to be focusing on winning your side of the argument, at least in a debate situation. I think when minds will be changed, it will probably be, one, from the audience, their minds may change, and two, us in our own conversations in the days, maybe weeks to come.
Yeah, and the
and what we've
research.
managed to dig up.
I think that generally, if you want to reach a conclusion versus present two sides to an argument, it's better to title it a discussion, and then there's active challenging and oh, interesting, and not necessarily two sides pitted against each other, which was still fun.
I'm good with it. I think it was entertaining.
Who is Eric? There's questions about Eric. Is this an inside joke I don't get?
Eric's he's a whole nother story, but Fate Win said, if you don't own a Tesla, how can you justify typing Elon Musk? Elon Musk.
I don't own a Tesla, but I did recently move to the suburbs, so I am leasing a car.
Did you drive one of your neighbor's Teslas? Then you should have joined in this debate. And Trey, you drove a Tesla, right?
I have driven a Tesla.
So you are the only one that is qualified to type Elon Musk.
Wow. Well, I say LA. No, I'm just overruled.
Elon Musk is SLI. I guess that's not quite a question. Someone trying to type Rita. That's not really on topic.
Andre, you've met me. Would you like to give a comment about this?
I don't know. I thought maybe IE, but I would not. I certainly do not know you better than you know yourself.
Really?
Wow, that was.
But yeah, that's studies have shown that the limit of people's continuous attention is usually about an hour and a half. So
not with us. Not with us. We're way more enjoyable than that.
Okay,
we can keep going.
Maybe it doesn't apply to SE leads. I don't know.
Yeah, we can keep it going. I know Jack and I can riff off of each other quite a bit.
I think people are.
I know that Clara will be wanting to spend some time this weekend, though, so I can't stay too much longer.
Right. All right. Well, I think that's a good stopping point. I think Andre agrees, right?
I do agree, but if anyone has something they're burning to get out, preferably not like a ILE versus LIE point, but just a general point, feel free to say it.
Just a hearty goodbye.
Aw.
All the participants.
Trey's sending virtual hugs.
Thank you, Trey.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Rita.
Thank you.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, audience.
I just want to thank everyone
Okay,
for
bye.
also talking on this debate. Also want to thank Alicia, who had to leave earlier as well, for volunteering at last minute to step in. So just want to thank everyone for taking part, especially you, Andre, for moderating this today.
Oh, thank you, Jack.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
And thank you to the audience. Bye-bye.
Take care.